Hello guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. It's me, Big Mike, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Big Mike, the series where I sit down for a chat with some rather interesting and amazing people over a nice cup of coffee. And joining us today, once again, is my favorite streamer and damn good friend, Tsar Khan. Welcome back, fam. How have you been?
Well, it's been quite an interesting day. But aside from today, I've been doing quite well. I have been rolling.
Now, I consider you a damn good friend. I also consider you somebody I look up to in our community. But for those of my audience who may not be familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, man, that's the $1 million question, ain't it? That's the resume question that everybody always hates to answer. But I don't know. I'm just Khan. You know, you really have to get a load of this kind of stuff that I put up on the internet to really get a feel for me. I guess if I were to give you like a sales pitch, I like to stream. I like to talk shit on Bluesky. I like to talk shit on Twitch, and I like to hang out with my people. I like to talk with people. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. It's not very specific, but I do feel like at its core, that's what it's all about. I'm just here to goof and gaff and entertain and be entertained and spend some good time with some good people.
Amen to that. And you know, Khan, he makes a great point. It's really hard to talk about his streams if you have not experienced them yourself. Like, it's a one-of-a-kind experience. I have even gone so far as to, I really have gone even so far as to compare Khan to a modern-day Andy Kaufman. I don't throw that around lightly because Andy Kaufman is one of my heroes. So
hell yeah, that's quite the honor to be compared to somebody like Andy Kaufman, because ever since you brought it up, I decided to look into him a little bit, and I'm like, you know, like somebody who did this really unique thing with such a medium of my personal preference, which is professional wrestling. Somebody who chose to do such a unique thing with such a unique medium and stand out while doing it. And, you know, I think his mantra, I remember reading on Wikipedia one time where he was talking about, I am not a comedian. I am an entertainer. He said a comedian's job is to make people laugh. I'm just here to make you feel something. I'm here to make you feel entertained and engaged, and you know, those two things can mean a wide variety of things. And you know, I like it because, you know, like, why pigeonhole yourself? I feel like too many people like to flanderize themselves these days because of brand recognition and stuff like that. So being compared to Andy Kaufman, that's a huge compliment.
We're going to talk about some conspiracies or maybe something closely related later on. But I just want to say, not too many people hope that there are conspiracies that are real, but there is a conspiracy floating around that Andy Kaufman faked his own death. And I do not believe that to be true. But if there was a conspiracy I wanted to be true, it would definitely be that one. It would definitely be that one. Man, that would be such an epic troll, bro. Such an epic troll.
Hell yeah. That would be like I think there's like a trope of like a magician, like a magician's death trick where like the magician pretends that they die and, you know, it fools the audience. So if Andy Kaufman were able to pull that off and remain incognito this whole time, he would be a genius.
Absolutely. Now, I just want to point out before we continue, now for my listeners who have been following this series for a while, I normally talk about the general interest stuff first and then move on and have discussions more focused on my guest. But if you saw my first episode of Coffee with Big Mike with Khan, then you know I like to talk about real and heavy shit with him. So we're going to focus on him a bit first, and then we're going to get to the real shit. And when I say real shit, fam, shit is going to get real, okay? And it's going to get heavy. And neither Khan or I, we're not going to hold back here. In fact, I told some of my close friends, and I'm going to tell you all right now, you know, in my last video I made, I said I'm living this this season of my YouTube activity as if it's going to be my last. And because I have no idea what's going to happen to the internet, and we're going to talk about that later. So I'm going to live with no regrets. And I'm going out with both guns blazing. And if the YouTube algorithm decides to cut me out, goddamn, so be it. But anyway, we'll get to that later. We'll get to that later. But I want to be a bit wholesome, which is kind of odd for me to say. If you've ever been in Khan's chat and you've seen me in his chat, you would not associate Mike with wholesome. And that's probably the understatement. That's probably the understatement of the century. So every year, if you don't know, Khan, he does something for April Fools. And Khan, Khan himself, he's not one to shy away from more lewd subjects. But this year for April Fools, he did a completely wholesome stream, a take on Mr. Rogers' neighborhood called Mr. Khan's Could De Sac, and really showed off his creative flexibility. So I want to ask you, Khan, what was that experience like?
Ooh, man. Doing Mr. Khan's Could De Sac, it had been an idea that had been on the back burner for probably like over a year or something like that. Because I think I was like joking about it on either Twitter or Blue Sky about doing like a Mr. Rogers kind of thing for April Fools. And this past April Fools, it almost didn't happen. Like, because I really worked down to the wire to get Mr. Khan's Could De Sac put together. Because I kept going back and forth on it in my mind. I was like, well, this is going to be like a really huge undertaking. Because, this would be like the first thing that I do that will have like real direction, like directing involved. Because anybody who saw the stream will know there was a scene where the introduction was playing. There was parts where I had to sing along with the introduction, and there was a lot of scene transitions. There was a lot of different moving parts to Mr. Khan's Could De Sac that I had to, first create myself, because I did all the assets for Mr. Khan's Could De Sac myself. I drew all the backgrounds. I drew all the props. I made all the music, and that was basically my rehearsal run, because I don't think I might have sang through the song once or twice, but going through the whole thing, that was just pretty much on the spot, because I didn't have a lot of time, because I didn't commit to the decision until maybe a few days before April Fool's Day. So in my mind, when I was making all of this stuff, part of me was like, maybe we should just back out. I don't think anybody would be upset if I didn't do something for April Fool's Day. Maybe some people would, but something of that caliber, I was like, there's no way we're going to get this finished in time. But, as with any kind of creative process that involves a deadline, you got to start getting creative with your creativity. You got to figure out what is going to work, what parts you can actually get done, what parts you're going to have to scrap, what kind of parts you're going to have to remake. So doing Mr. Khan's Could De Sac was a challenge. It was very intense. It was very, I don't want to say stressful, because I think once the night came along to, hit the go live button, I kind of just deadened my senses a little bit. And I'm like, all right, here it is. We got to run through it. And it's going to be what it is. And it turned out way better than I ever dreamed.
I was telling Khan this, that if he wanted to, he could take that format and he could be, he could be a children's YouTuber, or he could be a children's streamer. That, it reminds me of something that you would see on PBS. It really did. It felt like it could easily fit in with an early 90s to early 2000s children's program, and you would see Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Reading Rainbow or something of that nature. So I want to ask, do you think we could ever see a return of Mr. Khan's Could De Sac?
I've asked myself that a couple times now, because, I have all the assets, and, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, it would be kind of a waste if I only ever did Mr. Khan's Could De Sac once. And, the assets I made up, they're not fantastic assets, but, they did take time to make. And, I I have the game plan down. I got the music down. I have the lyrics for the songs down, and good idea of where the direction would go. So, who knows? If there was ever something I would return to and do a second episode of, I think Mr. Khan's Could De Sac has a pretty good chance of having a second episode. But, I don't know, part of me also thinks it's really funny to just have that one-off episode of Mr. Khan's Could De Sac. And I don't know, maybe potentially be dug up sometime in the future and have people wonder if there was like a whole series of Mr. Khan's Could De Sac that has lost media, maybe, somehow some young kid stumbled upon that stream and, like 10, 15 years from now, they're going to be like making YouTube videos saying, do you remember this kid's TV show? It was a guy with a cat head and he was singing songs and playing music and painting pictures. Like, does anybody remember this? I think that would be pretty funny.
I was just thinking about that. I was just thinking because I love lost media. It's something I'm interested in, and I could easily see that happening. I could easily see that. Now, speaking of people in the future digging stuff up, so if you're not familiar with Khan stream, so Khan tells stories, and as a book lover, as a literature lover, especially ancient literature, I love collecting stories. And so we put together what's known as the Khan Stream Library. And so these are a collection of about 20-some wild and crazy stories. Some very lewd, some a bit wholesome, some even life-changing. Some life-changing in a completely different reason. But all amazing nonetheless. And we often joke about putting this together and it being one of the only things to survive the downfall of humanity and being found by some extraterrestrial race sometime in the distant future, which would be it'd be really fucking hilarious if that happened. Because these stories are really crazy. But anyway, the reason why I bring all of this up is because I want to ask you to share one of those stories with us today. I'll let you choose whichever story you want. And so I'll let you take a moment and think. And whenever you're ready.
Oh, dearie dear. Which one do I pick? There's just so many good ones, we have stuff that ranges from like the parable of the Chinese farmer. We have, the airplane incident. But I think the one that is going to stick with me personally, like throughout the rest of my life, and if you're a regular to my stream, you would know this. You would know which one I'm going to pick. And it's actually not my story. I heard it from a good friend of mine. His name is Slayer on Twitch. He stops in from time to time. We've known each other for years now, and he has led quite the colorful life. He seems to have like a new story every time we talk, and I remember the day that I found out about the story known as the White Eye.
Oh boy. You lovely guys, gals, and non-binary pals and waterfowls are in for one hell of a ride with this one. Fun fact, so I'm not sure why any of you would do this, but if you have any children in your room right now that can hear this, you might not want them to hear this. So fair warning.
Yes.
Fair warning. All right.
Please exeunt all the children.
All right, but whenever you're ready, Con.
All right. So a little bit of backstory. I was in a group call with Slayer and another group of friends, and they had always spoken about this story. I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but they spoke about this story like in hushed tones, so I'd heard about this story in name a couple of times. And then just one late night, Slayer decided to actually go through the story because I was like, you know what? I've heard y'all talk about this. Like, what the hell is it? And, Slayer was talking about how he was having a house party. And, there's a lot of drinking, a lot of fraternizing going on. And he mentions that one of his drunken friends goes into the back bedroom where Slayer happened to keep his porno stash, right? So apparently this brother was striking out during the party because he had to go resort to the porno stash, and he had been gone for a little while, right? So one of the other party goers happens to notice that he's gone. He's like, man, he's been gone for a while. Like, you think he's all right? And Slayer's like, well, he's in the back bedroom, you know, said that knowingly, knowing what was probably going on. So this friend was like, oh, I'll go check on him. So the friend goes into the back bedroom and catches a glimpse of the man checking out the porno stash, right? And he must have been like really involved with it because the second that the fella interjected, he like called his name out or whatever, it scared him. It scared him so much that he got up from his porno session, spun around, and happened to bust one off in this poor, unsuspecting partygoer's eyeball. And I gotta tell you, the first time that I heard this story being told, it was like the first time that I read Othello. You know what's gonna happen. You're praying that it doesn't happen. Like, you almost want to reach into the pages of the book and be like, no, stop, please. Like, don't let this happen. But you know deep down inside that it's going to happen. So while he's telling this story, I am just over here internally crumbling because I'm like, I know what's going to happen. And I really don't want it to happen because something like that happening in this plane of existence does not sit right with me. So the time came, and so did he. And it was revealed, the money shot happened, and I was like, I was so devastated. I remember frowning into my microphone. There was no way anybody could see me, but I was like, with how much I'm frowning, somebody's got to feel it. Yeah, it's always going to be with me. I think just because of how like Shakespearean it was in that moment.
I can tell you, and I can tell my audience, I think I've heard this story on your stream maybe 3 or 4 times now. And it never gets any easier. Okay. It never, you want to scream, stop, don't do that. This is a bad idea. But, there's probably a good moral in there about what you should probably not do when you're outside of your house, outside of your own home. There's probably a good moral. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know the context, but I'm just assuming that wasn't the dude's home. He didn't live there, or he wasn't like a roommate or something like that. But yeah, don't do that. Just if you gotta love yourself, do it at your own home. Don't do it at somebody else's home, please. And don't do it at a movie theater too. But,
yes, please, God.
And there's so many more of those we could share. And actually, I want to have Khan back at some point in time where we could actually do a whole lot more of those Khan stream stories. Now,
yes, I had many tales.
So many too, so many. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you my favorite one. Well, I could tell you maybe my favorite in a certain genre, like the parable of the Chinese farmer. That for me was very powerful. That was a very powerful one for me. That was, I could even say, life-changing. But the other ones, like each one of those, they have something to offer, something very substantial for good or for bad. And many of those are life-changing in their own ways. So now, I forgot to ask you this at the beginning, so I'm going to ask you this now, and then we're going to move on to the real shit. Now, yes. A good friend of ours, my bestie and my manager, Honk Flap, she wants to know, what do you like to put on your tortilla?
Oh, man. Pretty much everything in the kitchen sink. For those that don't know, I'm a big fan of Mexican food and anything that resembles Mexican food that may or may not be. So pretty much anything that you can throw into a tortilla, I will give it a shot. Like, I have talked with Honk Flap many a time about the different kinds of, I don't know what you would call them, burritos, wraps, enchiladas, whatever you want to call them, things that are in tortillas. Because a lot of times, like if I can't find nothing else to eat, I would just take whatever kind of leftover that I have in the fridge and just throw it all in a tortilla. You know, if you get like if you just throw some meat and a vegetable in there, like a hearty vegetable, like you got yourself a meal there. The tortilla just kind of kicks it up a notch, to quote Emeril Lagasse. But if I were to pick what do I like to put in my tortillas the best, it would probably have to be like a shredded chicken, maybe some sauteed vegetables, you know, peppers, onions. You could even get more in there if you add in like some broccoli, some beans, some rice. Pretty much anything works in a tortilla, and I think that's what's great about them is the flexibility. But and cheese, you got to have some cheese, and you got to have. I usually like to put spring mix in it, so like a mix of like arugula, spinach, a lot of those other kinds of leafy vegetables, just because you know they're better for you than just using regular lettuce. And you know it's nice to have something green on your plate. But yeah, oh yeah, and you got to have some hot sauce. Always got to have the hot sauce. So yeah, the answer is like, what do I like in a tortilla? I think it would probably be easier to say, what don't I like in a tortilla? I don't think that list would be very long.
Well, from what I know about my bestie, she would be very proud of that answer, especially the first part when, you know, you said you like to put leftovers in it. Honk Flap is very utilitarian. Mm-hmm. She loves doing stuff like that, which, if you like that, you might want to check out my episode of Coffee with Big Mike with Honk Flap. Highly recommended if you're interested in food, you know, eating on a budget and that kind of stuff. But with that out of the way, them consequences of the Industrial Revolution are about to get very real. And just let me point this out before we start this, okay? Let me just point this out. If I sound a bit annoyed, a bit tired, if Khan sounds that way, let me tell you something, okay? We struggled to record this for about an hour and a half. Because out of all days that Discord decides to shit itself, it happened to be on this day that we're going to talk about this real shit. And just for context, you know, Discord has shit itself on me before. But I've been doing Coffee with Big Mike since 2021, and I've never had this to happen on a Coffee with Big Mike recording day. So you know what? Fuck you, Industrial Revolution and its consequences.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. It took us an hour and a half just to be able to have a voice call.
No, we're going to start out with some lighter stuff, and then we're going to move on to some more heavier stuff. Now, last year, you were kicked off YouTube again. And recently, maybe in the past month or two, you were suspended from Blue Sky. Why do you think this keeps happening?
Well, to quote Charlie Murphy, it's because I'm a habitual line stepper, you know. In the case of the last Blue Sky suspension, I knew I was going to catch it for that one. Like, out of all of them, that was the one I knew. Like, right when I made that post, I was like, yep, this one's probably going to get me. As for, like, the 2 terminations from YouTube, I still have no idea why I got labeled as a terrorist. Because the first time, like, it just came out of nowhere. I didn't even realize that it had happened until a friend of mine, Isaac, he pointed it out. He sent me a message. He was like, hey, like, did you get banned on YouTube? And I looked, I was like, wait, hold on. I went and logged in, and sure enough, I had just got outright banned. And they said it was because I was supporting terrorist activity. Like, like, I have never supported terrorist activity on any of my videos up to that point. So I don't even know what the hell they were talking about that first time. And then the second time, you know, by that point, I'm pretty sure they had caught on that it was me again. So technically I could have got for ban evasion, but they used the same excuse again. And they never told me which video. They never told me. They never gave me nothing. No screenshot, not a fucking timestamp, nothing. They didn't tell me what it was. They didn't tell me how I could correct it. And I went through all the appeal processes both times to be like, hey, like, what's going on here? But each time they were just real short. They were like, yep, you did something bad and you're getting banned for it. And that's it. No explanation, nothing at all, no information whatsoever. I even like harassed them on fucking Twitter about it. I remember the first time I got banned, a lot of our friends and mutual friends kicked up a little bit of a fuss towards YouTube's Team YouTube Twitter page. You know, the channel that everybody goes to whenever YouTube be fucking up because they don't manage their own website on their own website. And they gave me the same response that they gave me in all the emails. They were like, yep, you did something bad, get fucked. And that was pretty much the end of it. As for Blue Sky, the first time I got suspended, that was some time ago. I don't even remember what it was for. But this last time, it was around that time where Sam Altman's house caught fire. And I made a cheeky little retweet about it, where all I said in the tweet was, now do it again until he's dead. You know, I knew I was going to get got for that one. The moment that I sent, I was like, you know what? They're probably going to get me for that.
Let me stop you right there, Khan. Let me stop you just a moment. Let me stop. I hate to interrupt you, but Khan did nothing wrong by saying that statement. Please continue, Khan.
Yeah, I thought so too, but apparently Blue Sky did not take too kindly to that. Or somebody didn't, because I didn't get banned right away. Like a couple weeks went by and I kind of forgot about it. And then just out of nowhere, one day I couldn't sign into Blue Sky. And I checked my email and they were like, yep, there's this tweet right here for threatening somebody or some shit like that. I tried to be an asshole about it and I tried to appeal it and say, well, look, I didn't refer directly to Sam Altman. I just said, until he's dead. I could have been personifying the house, you know, and I could have just been using the word dead as like a catch-all for being destroyed. Yeah, they didn't buy into that. So I had me a nice little 7-day vacation, I think it was, from Blue Sky, which was nice, actually.
Now, first off, I want to say, fuck you, YouTube, and fuck you, Google, okay? What kind of company has "don't be evil" as a slogan and removes that, okay? You know, you can't trust anybody. Like, well, first off, they even have that as a slogan. You know, you shouldn't trust that, but even worse than that is to have that as a slogan and remove it. So yeah, fuck you. Secondly, if you're not a YouTuber, you might not understand this, but what Khan brought up is a very real point. It's like, if you have trouble on YouTube, there's nothing on the platform. There's absolutely nothing on the platform to help you. You have to go to an external website, an external social media site to get help. What kind of platform does that? What other major platform does that? It's insane. And this is supposed to be a multi-billion-dollar company. One of the biggest tech companies, and they can't even have a help section on their goddamn platform.
Yep. All that money, they can't hire enough people.
And if it sounds like I'm pissed, I am pissed because I've had issues with my YouTube and issues to where, my videos were being set to private for no reason. And nobody helped me. I reached out to YouTube on Twitter and got no response. Thank God the problem resolved itself somehow. But yeah, in fact, they even made a video about that. I think it's called something like a major YouTube problem has my channel at risk. That's what that video was about. So yeah, it's stupid. It really, really is stupid. And we lost so much good content because of what they did to Khan. We lost his first playthrough of Katawa Shoujo. We lost his playthrough of Doki Doki Literature Club. We lost the first Regal Rumble and Nugget Mania. And those were classic moments. That's Khan stuff. But I'm a member of his community, and I know that that's gonna mean more to him way than it will ever mean to me. But that's still memories I hold dear in my heart. So it's just like somebody fucking with my friend's kids. They're not my kids, but, I'm close to those kids, so you're pissing me off too.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Amen.
To calm down a little bit, what have you learned from those situations?
Well, if I want to stay on Blue Sky, it means I'm going to have to check my language a little bit. But I don't know if I can help that. I mean, I can help that, but I don't know if I want to help that. Because, some things have to be said, right? Especially when it comes to the AI tech bros. Because these people are destroying the planet for their own personal gain, and they're trying to do inhumane shit by, well, not only just destroying the planet, but destroying the value of a human being by making us obsolete. And, these are all I think people call them microaggressions, but I like to call it the violence inherent in the system. Because if you or I were talking about this shit in any kind of context outside of business, people would think we're fucking crazy. People would want to lock us up. But because these assholes are doing it to make $1, people are like, oh, well, business is business and all that shit. And I really fucking hate that, because it basically just gives a blank check to these assholes to do whatever they want to. And I don't fuck with that. They're doing horrendous things to untold amounts of people. So what is different between them doing that and me just saying some shit? I just said some shit. They're out here causing real life consequences, Industrial Revolution levels of consequences, you could say. And you telling me that these assholes with enough money to make Solomon blush have any kind of consequences or repercussions that a person like me could ever deliver? I mean, potentially, but, I'm not going to do none of that because I don't want to get shit canned. And, that's just me being real. And unfortunately, I think that's the case for a lot of people. I think maybe that the circuses and bread are a little too, they've sunk too deep at this point, because nobody's willing to do hardly fucking anything to make a difference. So at the very least, I can at least talk shit about it. I can come on here and be like, I hate you and I hate your guts, and I want every bad thing in life to happen to you and nobody except for you, to Sam Altman. And that should be fine. That should be fine. But no, I have to be policed endlessly while these assholes get to run free and do whatever the hell they want to the planet and its inhabitants. And that's okay, because it's in the name of making money. And, that's kind of a long-winded explanation on the stuff that I've learned. But I guess to circle back around, aside from policing myself, specifically from YouTube and Blue Sky, it's that you can't rely on these kinds of companies to keep your shit in order. And you can't rely on these kinds of companies to be fair and equitable. Because, we were talking about that thing about YouTube is lacking a help function. That shit has happened to big YouTubers, millions of subscriber YouTubers. And, they're lucky enough to have some pull to get some kind of attention and some kind of private review. Whereas little guys like you and me, it's pretty much just get fucked, So yeah, fuck these companies.
So we're going to talk more about the damage they're doing in a bit later. The major damage they're doing to the planet. But before we move on, and I want to ask you about some other cool stuff you're working on as a result of this, or maybe not as a result of this, but maybe inspired more as a result of this. But I want to bring up a conversation I had. So for those who don't know, I'm a teacher in real life. I teach English as a second language. I'm mostly a conversation practicer, or people practice their conversation with me, which is a really great explanation of my job. But anyway, I'm an English teacher, and I had a student from China, and we were talking about how these companies are using phones, iPhone and Android and such, to listen to us and to spy on us, to show us ads. And we were talking about a story, and I teach adults too. I don't teach kids. So, very important context for this story I'm about to tell you. There is this story going around the internet about this woman and her husband or boyfriend or whoever, they're having marital relations, all right? And she tells the dude to finish inside of her, okay? And after the act is done, she gets up and she checks her phone, and her iPhone is giving her ads for Plan B and condoms and other types of stuff. So you can't even make love with your significant other without having these big companies listening in on you. And what's even crazy, if this was a person, if this was an individual, spying on you in your most intimate moments, they would be in jail. They would be in prison. But because this is a corporation, a giant corporation, they can get away with it. It is fucking insane. It's different strokes for different folks. And the higher up you are, the less strokes you get. Well, you don't get any strokes at all, I should say. So it's fucking bullshit. It really, really is. Because nothing is sacred anymore to these people.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So, and then to kind of mellow out a bit, the point I was making before I went off on that tirade is that you've been working on making your own site. And so what inspired that? And what has the process been like?
So I am a fan of how the internet used to be circa anywhere from 2000, and I think the first time that I ever had reliable access to the internet was 2001-ish, and it wasn't even in my house. And from that time period on to about, say, I usually like to use the cutoff date of about 2007, because that's when, I think that's when Facebook started to become real big, and smartphones were just about to break through. So I'm a big fan of the personal website. I'm a big fan of static web pages from the old internet. And I have very fond memories of, doing searches way back in the day for stuff like aliens or ghosts or, urban legends, shit like that. I was really into cryptozoology when I was growing up. So going on the internet and potentially seeing quote unquote real people having these kinds of experiences, it kind of fed into that part of my brain that wanted to believe, right? But there was also just other cool places to go to that were individuals or very small teams. And hell, even the big companies that had websites back then, they put in a lot of effort into their websites to make them unique and make them stand out. And I think that's just a sign of the times. But as we all know, today's world, internet's been almost completely stripped of its soul, of its individuality. Any kind of standout identity has pretty much been washed away and sanitized in hopes of conformity. And, I don't like that. So I had heard about this place called Neocities a little while ago, where you can make your own website for free. And during this little break that I took from Bluesky when I was suspended, I had already had a website, had the bones of a website up, but I was like, you know what? I got some extra time now that my brain is not being accosted and hooked onto a algorithmic feed that never ends. Maybe I should get back to working on the website. And so I did that. So I made some pretty good strides. I'm still trying to figure out things as I go along. I'm trying to teach myself how to do all the HTML in a way that makes sense to me and in a way that's easily maintainable. But it's been a liberating experience because we don't have too many things that give us agency anymore. Everything wants to do everything for us, which is terrible because you don't grow that way. So it's been a nice exercise actually getting to make a mark on the internet in the way that it was when I was growing up. And I think that's the way that a lot of people on the internet, if we're still able to use it, are going to end up going, especially now that it's being hyper corporatized. This is the last final push to corporatize the internet, I feel like. So individual websites and services like Neocities are doing good work by giving us an avenue for that.
I've actually started it myself, actually. Thanks to Khan. Khan actually inspired that for me. I've actually been working on Neocities a lot. And it's been, on the one hand, it's been really, really interesting. It's been challenging, to learn code and to put it into practice. On the other hand, I've loved that challenge because sometimes things will not go as you plan, and you have to find a workaround. You have to find a solution, and it is a bit annoying, but it's also, for me, it feels, I get it's such a great sense of satisfaction when I encounter a problem like that and I'm able to overcome it. I'm able to find a workaround. Now, sometimes the workaround isn't pretty. Sometimes it's really jank. But you could probably say the same thing about a lot of the things I do. But I like that, and I hate to use this term, especially we're going to be discussing a bit later. But I feel like starting your own site, it's a great way, and it's a non-offensive way of kind of rekindling that American pioneer spirit. You're striking out on your own, away from big corporations, and you go out and you carve out a little piece of your own. And because this is the internet, you don't have to deprive people of their land to do this. And so it's a way to kind of get that experience without hurting other people. And I think a bit of self-reliance within moderation is something great to have. One last thing I want to ask you about this, and then we'll move on to some even more harder shit, is, since you've been coming back from your suspension on Bluesky, you've been spending less time there and more time on Neocities. What has the transition back to Web 1.0 been like?
Well, I kind of made mention of this earlier, but modern internet stuff is just, it is there to waste your fucking time. I think that the never ending feed is probably one of the most sinister bits of coding that anybody's ever implemented into web design. And not just for the reasons that it keeps you hooked onto a website. Even just from a functionality standpoint, I miss when web pages used to have fucking pages. Numbered pages that I could go to, not shit that will endlessly refresh. And I made a post about this on Bluesky, but it sure as hell seems like the internet is really small, smaller than they want us to believe. Because I can go on eBay, I can go on fucking so many other sites that are supposed to have randomized scrolling pages, and I can go on eBay, I can see the same damn listing 4 times on a scroll, and I'm like, well, this is supposed to be a conglomeration of everybody in this country selling shit, and I've seen the same thing 4 or 5 times now, and it just feels like I'm being bullshitted. It feels empty. And in the case of social media, I know it's bullshit and I know it's empty. I hate YouTube Shorts. I hate endlessly scrolling feeds on Bluesky or a Twitter, for instance, because that is really damaging to our reward process. You know what I'm saying? I think I had said something one time before, or maybe I wrote it somewhere, but it's natural to, whenever you do anything, even if it's something that you love, any kind of craft, playing music, playing video games, it's natural if you spend a couple hours doing something to get tired of it and you want to quit, right? You work on a craft for a few hours, hands get sore, you're like, all right, I'm done, calling it. Same with the video game, your eyes get tired, you're like, yeah, it's time to do something else. And that's because you put effort in. You put a little bit of effort in whenever you do something, but these algorithmic feeds and endlessly scrolling pages, they don't require any effort at all. And that's why so many people lose days worth of time on them. So many people experience this where they're just yeah, I went to check Instagram or something, and then before I knew it, 4 hours had gone by and I hadn't felt like I'd done anything. It's because you didn't really do anything. They're trying to streamline shit to the point where it is only there to waste your time and show you ads and potentially sucker you out of money. That's also tied into like notifications and shit too, because, you know, those are like that's the bait to get you to go back into something. And in the case of like eBay, whenever I get notifications for some shit, sometimes I'll end up buying some shit that maybe I didn't even want. And since I've started to learn this trick, I've started to just not listen to my notifications as much. So going back to Web 1.0, where it's just, here's the page, here's the information, you have to read it, you have to navigate it, and do what you will with that. I can go and I can read a couple people's websites. I can go and, you know, browse somebody's image galleries for a little while. I can read the blog posts. I have to go out and find the information, right? And that little bit of effort, as small as it may be, gives me satisfaction. And it also reminds me that, like, yeah, I could stay here and read 75 different websites, but, you know, reading through like a few of them, I want to give my eyes a rest. I'm going to move on. So I think having that agency is it's a big thing.
I want to point out something before we move on. You know, and in my experience going back to Web 1.0, I would say at first it feels lonely at first. What's odd about it is, you know, I was around for the original, I was around for Web 1.0. It didn't feel lonely then. It did not feel lonely, you know, in the days before social media and such. There was a cool website you could visit. Like I would go to planetnamek.com, which I'll talk about on my website in the near future, or I could go to, you know, some other really cool site. And, you know, despite the fact that I wasn't really interacting directly with other people, it didn't feel lonely. But going back after X amount of years on social media, at first it did feel lonely. But after about a week or so of getting used to that situation again, it feels just like it did back in the day. And I think that agency does have a lot to do with it. I'm not being force-fed stuff now. I'm not being force-fed from people or stuff from people I know and don't know. But I have the agency to choose. Okay, oh, this is a really cool site. Let me go check that out. Or this looks quirky. Let me see what they're talking about. You know, that agency there. I feel like you don't get that loneliness when you have that agency. But I do think it's something that it takes some getting used to. Especially if you're like me and you're coming from social media. We've been conditioned to, you know, be fed stuff from people we know or other people that we do not know. And so to break away from that, it's going to take some getting used to, just like it took you getting used to social media at first.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I do want to point out, while talking about social media, I will say even in the days of MySpace, that loneliness, you know, surfing the web didn't exist. It wasn't until the endless feed bullshit started happening. I feel like it started up.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Shit's about to get really real here, fam. Really, really, really real. So we talked about this in our last episode, and it's even more relevant now. It seems that the internet is constantly under attack from people who want to limit its access, maybe regionalize it or fragment it, or people who want to herd its users into a few certain platforms. Why do you think this is the case, Khan?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the hyper corporatization of the internet is like the biggest threat to it right now. Because when the internet, like when we were growing up, Web 1.0, even in the 2.0 days, the internet was almost seen as kind of a fad. Like I remember there being a time where a bunch of people, majority of people, were like, yeah, the internet is something that you don't really need, right? You know, that's crazy to think of today because, like, both of us need the internet in order to do our jobs and make money. And so much of our infrastructure is based around the internet, as scary as that sounds. But I think whenever the first inklings of Web 1.0 were coming out and, you know, maybe past the .com bubble where people were standing on fertile ground, essentially, And corporations had been shown that, hey, maybe this internet thing really isn't all that worthwhile for us. The internet kind of had this little period where people were the main providers and the main people who were claiming their own stake on this big, vast land of opportunity. So that's why we saw a lot more slapdash sites back in the day, things that were constantly under construction and constantly being abandoned, really. If people were just doing things because they liked to, or because they wanted a project to do, or because they had a passion to share or a story to tell, or, what have you. But, with that level of democratization, that's always going to cause problems with the powers that be. So, as time went on, we started to see more and more stuff getting restrictive, in slight ways here and there. Well, depending on how you look at that, but they changed things on a massive scale, but in subtle ways. Like, they've completely changed how we use language now. Like, they've completely changed social dynamics. They've completely changed political dynamics now. And it's all through like very subtle tweaking of how people can make a living. Because, like, for me personally, I feel like when people were really started to be able to make real money on the internet in a quasi mainstream way, like I remember back when the first YouTubers were talking about buying like Lamborghinis and shit with their YouTube money. And it seems like ever since then, shit has just gone downhill. Because whenever money gets involved, the shit always goes downhill, don't it?
Every single damn time, man. Every single time.
Yeah, I'm for real. Like, everything that I have seen over the course of my life on the internet, it has gone from quaint passion projects into enterprises. And, I watched an interview recently with Rick Rubin where he was talking about the artistic process. And when he said that when he makes music, he says that the audience comes last. And he thinks that art is when you make something for yourself. And he was using the example of like big blockbuster movies that are like focus grouped to death, and like it's all about the numbers that some suit in a boardroom spouts out that a movie has to hit. And he said whenever a movie like that is made by people who don't care about it, and you can just substitute movie for whatever medium, it ceases being art and it turns into commerce. And I feel like that's happened all over the internet now. Like, there's hardly any people who I would consider to be like truly passionate about doing anything on the internet, because there's always this carrot on the stick somewhere of, if you follow our rules, use our language that we've created, and follow these guidelines to marketability and sell out, essentially, you have a shot at being in the big club. But as we all know, none of us is ever going to make it in the big club because they not taking applications from people like us. So,
yep.
Yeah. I feel like that's why the internet's being sectioned off and blocked. And then there's also like the government issue. Like, I don't even want to say like government. It's just the powers that be. This shit is like worldwide. They don't want people to have this much power, and they don't want people to have this much independence in their own perseverance in the world. So they got to hamstring it somehow.
I agree. You mentioned earlier in your answer, you mentioned that, whenever money comes into play, it always fucks things up. And I 100% agree with that. Capitalism is a lot like Elon Musk. Everything it touches, it fucks up. You cannot tell me any type of art that has been positively influenced by capitalism. You can't tell me anything for the public good that Elon Musk has touched has been good. I just want to, while we're here, while we're talking about that fucker, if you get your money, from if you get your money from slavery or human trafficking, fuck you, okay? Fuck you. I gotta watch myself. Here. But you know what? And what gets me is people worship this fucker like he's some type of self-made business genius. Not only is this fucker not self-made, he got his money from his family, who got their money from forcing people to work in slavery, mining blood diamonds. So yeah, fuck you. Now, the other thing I want to bring up here is the control of information. Now, I mentioned this a bit on my Blue Sky at some point in time, but having access to information is critical, especially historical data, because it's with that information that we're able to hold those in power accountable. So if we limit that, we can't hold them accountable. If we don't have access to past records, we can't call them out on their bullshit. Likewise, that old adage about knowledge being power, that is very true. If you take away knowledge, you take away power. An ignorant population is a complacent population. And lastly, I want to bring up, if we can't have connections with each other, and humans are social creatures, by the way, if we don't have that connection, we not only do we lose different perspectives, but eventually our mental states, our mental health, we deteriorates. And a population that lacks any real type of connection with each other, that suffers heavily from mental illness, is so easy to control. So, call me a conspiracy theorist, call me whatever you want to call me. I do believe in some conspiracies. I don't believe in crazy shit like flat Earth, or certain medicines causing autism. No, I don't believe in that crazy shit. But I do believe that the powers in charge do shady shit in the shadows when nobody's looking. So make it at what you will. I want to ask you one final question before we move on to an even heavier topic.
Yeah.
So let's say we wake up tomorrow, Khan, and the internet as we know it is gone. Maybe it's replaced with a more locked down version, or maybe it's gone completely. How would you react to that? And do you have a plan for if or when that day happens?
Man, I have been working on this plan for probably since the beginning of this year, because like I said, this seems to be like the last major power grab that the powers that be are trying to do for the internet. Because as well as I do, just in the past few months alone, so many different countries, so many different states, so many different governments have put forth the same idea of age verification and shit like that in an effort to further surveil the population. And, that's a whole can of worms that I'm sure we'll touch on later. But because of this, I have been trying to figure out my exit plan for if the internet ever goes belly up, right? So if it were to go away tomorrow, it would be quite the shock to me, because, a lot of my plans still haven't come to fruition yet. I need to figure out a way to keep in contact with my friends that I've met over the internet. I think that would be the biggest blow if it were to just be gone tomorrow, because, being on the internet is great because we can be anonymous, and especially in our particular genre of the internet spheres, being VTubers and such, the anonymity is kind of the thing, right? So it's great for that, but it has the double-edged sword that you don't know anything about this person. You might know a general area that they're from. You might know little tidbits, but you'll never be able to track them down. You'll never to communicate with them again. You'll never be able to meet up because they're probably so far away. And just think about all the relationships that would get destroyed across the world if the internet just goes belly up tomorrow. I think that would be the hardest part for me, because I've made a lot of dear friends in my little stint here on the internet in this capacity. So just waking up and not being able to talk to them anymore, that would be almost like the fear that I have that one day I'm gonna wake up from a coma and like all of this is gonna be a dream. It would be like that kind of shock. I would be so upset for something like that. All the other stuff I could pretty much take or leave. Like, there's a lot of videos on the internet that I hold near and dear, or that I really like and would like to preserve for myself. I've already started taking steps to do that. But I think all that pales in comparison to the people.
I will say, for me, it's an interesting situation for me because I'm, not only would I lose my friends like you and Honk and so many other wonderful people I met, I would also lose my family too because, living half the world away from my family, the internet is how I keep in contact with them. It's,
Mm-hmm.
and I have, over the course of my YouTube, and you all probably have seen this from my uploads, I've been through some stuff to where I really seriously thought about just walking away from everything. Coming close to death several times will have you rethinking a lot of things in your life. But ultimately, it's the people, the friends I made that have kept me here, that have kept me coming back. And I know
Amen.
My life would not have as much value as it has if I was to give that up. So, yeah, I don't really have a plan. I wish I could tell you, hey, I have this great idea. I'm looking to some older technology like, ham radio, shortwave radio. But realistically, I don't know. I really don't know. I would lament the day that happens. That would be that truly would be probably one of the worst consequences of the Industrial Revolution to ever face mankind. Now, this next topic is going to be even more heavy, but it's going to be a bit shorter. And then we're going to get to the really heavy shit. The sad part about all of this is that it's not just stopping with the internet, but they're trying to push age verification at the OS level or the operating system level. Some states and even the U.S. federal government are discussing enacting laws to put this into place. Now, since I wrote this question, there's been a couple developments here. First, on the one hand, there are states that have seriously considered this, like California and Minnesota. But they had some amendments we're probably going to talk about in a few moments. On the other hand, there have been countries that have enacted such a law, such as Brazil. So I want to ask you, Khan, how do you feel about it?
I think this age verification thing is probably like the worst thing that has happened to the internet probably since its inception. For one, it's like completely baseless. Well, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. It's completely baseless when it comes to the actual like know-how of how computers work, because like refrigerators have operating systems, TVs have operating systems. Multiple different parts of your car have different operating systems. Are you expected to pull out your driver's license for each and every one of those? Like, do you have to get up like 3 hours ahead of time in the morning just to go out and age verify for every single electronic component in your car? What about for your oven, your refrigerator, your TV? Like, it's nonsensical in its interpretation by the feds. And just the privacy aspect. As we've seen numerous times now, services that do this age verification shit where they need pictures of your ID, they don't keep them secure. They get breached. I think I heard somewhere that there was an age verification system that got passed in the European Union, and within 2 minutes of it going live, it was already hacked by and not even from a war games super hacker. It was like a 15-year-old in his bedroom with it was like a script kiddie that hacked it. And I'm like, and you really expect me to give my government ID to you over some shit like this for using a website And I think that's the thing that boggles my mind the most. Like, we grew up in a time where you didn't give out any information to anybody on the internet. Shit, I was baffled when people had their whole names out on Facebook. I was like, whoa, like, ain't that a little bit risky? I grew up from the time of screen names and shit. So the idea of having to break out my ID to use a website, like, are you fucking crazy? Like, to me, that just doesn't jive well. And I feel like it doesn't jive well to anybody from our generation. Just because we know how the internet really is, I think some of the younger people are having trouble with this. But then again, some of the younger people are actually fighting back. And they're doing goofy Looney Tunes tactics to get past this age verification, like the ones that ask for selfies and shit. Kids have circumvented this stuff by using fake mustaches. And I just find that to be such a heartwarming thing. Like, it makes me think that the kids are going to be okay when they're out doing shit like that. Or like people using photographs of like driver's licenses from cartoons, like Homer Simpson's driver's license or SpongeBob's driver's license. And they're getting through these age checks. Like, for one, good on these kids for having the ingenuity to do that. And for two, like, shame on these assholes for thinking that this shit is, for one, secure, and two, any good at what it's going to be doing. Because a lot of it's backed by AI, which doesn't fucking know anything. And it's just one more way to surveil who is doing what. You know? Because if you have to provide your ID to use any website, who's to say that the powers that be, maybe they don't agree with that website. Maybe they don't agree with what they stand for. Maybe it doesn't agree with their values, you know. And who is honestly going to show their ID to use, like, a porn site, for instance, if it's going to be on record that they went there? Like, it's just such an invasion of privacy. It doesn't work. And it's just fundamentally flawed in terms of both humanity and technology.
Yep. I know there are a couple things I just want to point out here. First off, anytime somebody says, "Oh, won't you please think of the children?" that shit is a Trojan horse, okay? That's a Trojan horse for them to take away your freedom. And this has happened so many times, I can't believe more people aren't picking up on this. And it just baffles. No, this isn't about the children. This is about control of you. But they use that term to weaponize it. They, on the one hand, to get sympathy. On the other hand, they can use being against that to demonize people. Oh, you're a predator, or you want to hurt children. This man right here, he wants to hurt children because he's against this. You know, that, and, you know, when you get stigmatized like that, that can fuck you up in so many social ways. And a lot of these social stigmas, they never go away. And so, yeah, I don't buy into that. Now, there is a bit of some good here. There is a bit of some good here. Well, and I use good here in a very subjective sense. It's better in the sense of, like, you're having diarrhea and you're on a toilet versus you're having diarrhea and you're out in the middle of public and you shit yourself. That's, you know, diarrhea definitely isn't good, but, you know, that first situation is definitely better. But states like California and Minnesota have made exemptions, or they have amendments to their bills to make exemptions for open source OSs. What do you think about that?
Well, it's like you said, it's probably the silver lining in what is otherwise a completely shitty situation, because, you know, it works for us because you and me are both fans of Linux and open source technology. And since those are being exempted, at least by those two states right now, I hope that the federal law is going to follow suit. You know, at least there's an out, right? There's an out for the people that want to take it, which is kind of how it's always been, you know, especially over the past few years of Windows and Mac getting more and more restrictive and filled with bloat and telemetry that tracks all your shit. You know, it feels just like a natural extension almost, because Linux was always there then. And if you wanted to circumvent that bullshit that Apple and Microsoft do, you could go to Linux. But with this, when this law first came out, it was almost like there was no way to get out at all. And don't get me wrong, it's still bad. Most people still use Windows. Shit, more people use Mac than they do Linux. But at least there's an out now.
And if anything, this may push more people to Linux, which would be really great to get away from Apple and Microsoft's bullshit. So there may be some good to come out of this. Now, because we're getting kind of low on time, I want to kind of move on to the heaviest thing here. Now, since the last time we talked, a new form of colonialism called data colonialism has appeared in the world in the form of data centers. Now, I want to explain a bit about my use of the term data colonialism. This is not my term. I got it from native activist Crystal Two Bulls, and I don't know if it originated with her or not, but she said data centers are continued colonialism in the name of imperialism. As data centers go into native lands, and native lands here mean Native American lands, make all kinds of sweet promises while keeping none of those promises and extracting all of their resources, and oftentimes without prior warning to most of the population. What will happen is the council who runs these places, or the chief, every native place, every native reservation or native land is ran differently. But regardless of if it's one chief or a council, they're forced to sign NDAs. And so most of their population, they don't get knowledge of this. They're not allowed to have a voice here. And that's silencing the forms of democracy that these people practice. So I just wanted to point that out, that when this happens, not only are these companies not fulfilling their promises, they're exploiting the land of these already and historically marginalized people. So I just wanted to just kind of explain this a bit. So I wanted to be clear that my use of the term colonialism here is not hyperbole. And if you would like to learn more about this situation, I will include a link to Crystal Two Bulls' interview with Democracy Now! In the description below. But I want to ask, and I already know the answer to this, but I think our audience would love to hear, what are your thoughts on data centers?
Fuck data centers. If we're talking about things that I feel like it is so egregious, the things that data centers are doing, that I am surprised that more people have not begun tearing these motherfucking things down. Because we have seen over the past few years that whenever a data center gets dropped, usually in a marginalized neighborhood, it literally turns the environment into poison. Like, people have died because of the environmental damage that data centers do. They come in, they steal all the water, they turn the air into poison. And for what? So ChatGPT can tell somebody to go kill themselves and put glue in the pizza? Like, how are people not more mad about this, for one? I remember seeing something about a place in Georgia where the local residents didn't have running water because the data centers were using so much fucking water. And, this isn't like a fancy resource. This isn't a luxury. This is water. The thing that human beings need to live. The thing that if you go 96 hours without it, you will die. The building blocks of life, water. And people were not getting it sent to their house because of data centers. That shit right there should be cause enough to burn every single one of these motherfucking things down. Not only that, but they destroy the fucking air quality of any place they are put. All of the fucking noise pollution, all of the fucking light pollution, the fucking damage that they have to do to build the motherfucking thing, because these things are like football fields in size. And not to mention all the shady bullshit practices that go down with local governments, because like you said, the same thing applies to regular townships and shit. Mayors will be under NDAs, so they can't tell the public that these things are being built. It should be a red flag for anybody. Why the hell would you not want the public to know until it's already here? Obviously, these assholes are doing something shady. Obviously, they know nobody wants this fucking technology, but they're going to do it anyway. I hate them. I hate them with a passion. And anybody who runs these places should have their entire fucking data centers burnt down, and these motherfuckers should be run out of town on a rail.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And I would extend this a bit further. Okay, if these people, if they weren't doing anything wrong, these corporations weren't doing anything wrong, why the fuck are they using shell companies to open these places? Why aren't they doing it directly? These people, they make, they do shit like that. They make all these sweet promises, and and you're correct. In addition to what I talked about happening with Native Americans, this is also happening. This is also happening, as you mentioned, to common people. They go in, they make all these promises like, okay, we're going to have so many new jobs because of this. So many new jobs. That's bullshit, okay? Data centers, when they're being built, there are a lot of jobs, a lot of new jobs come to the area. But this is what they don't tell you. Those new jobs are groups of trained people who travel around to build those fucking data centers. They're not from the local population, or the majority are not from the population. And once the data center is built, those jobs go away. And and just to kind of elaborate on the pollution aspect, in addition to the light pollution, the noise pollution, the regular pollution, the water pollution, the air pollution, there's also heat pollution too. So if you live near a data center, you can expect your area to be 4 or 5, maybe even 6 degrees hotter than normal. These things have become heat islands. Okay? And when is enough going to be enough? Okay? When are people going to say, hey, enough is enough. We're not going to take this anymore. There's a YouTuber I look up to, and you quote him a lot too. And I really hate the fact that he's gone down the route of AI. But AJ Gentile, who runs the waterfowls, he did an episode on the family jewels, and he said that for the past 40 to 60 years, the CIA and other deep state and government agencies have been seeing with the American public just what they can get away with. I would take that a step further. I definitely believe that, but I would take it a step further. Corporations, they're seeing just how far they can go with us. They see we're complacent. And the thing about these data centers, not just the data centers, but big tech, if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. On my blue sky, I put forth a great analogy, and this is going to be probably a little too lewd for some people. Fuck it, make it what you will. If you like old school hentai, big tech is like the proverbial tentacle sex monster. It's going to force its way into all of your private parts without your consent, whether you want it to or not. So you can't give these people an inch because they will take a mile and then some. Thinking about this whole situation with the water, I can't help but think of that son of a bitch Nestle CEO who said that water should not be a human right. I feel like this is these tech bros putting that shit into practice. And that truly is, or that truly will be, if this isn't stopped, a disaster for the human race.
Yep. It's funny you bring up Nestle because they were doing the exact same thing, and I have not done any research into what people did to Nestle because from what I remember, Nestle would come into areas and pay like a $200 water tax and just completely drain the local area of their entire water supply. And as we know, these data centers are doing the same thing. They are taking entire areas. They're taking their whole water supply to use for their stupid ass enterprise of, like, for what? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like, I remember saying years ago that we're starting to peak out on the things that provide value, right? Because it seems like things are only getting marginally, if that, better. But the cost to get these marginal improvements is going way up beyond like being a good value anymore. And I think that's 100% true for these stupid AI data centers. Because look at all the resources they take to make shit that is subpar at best. Because you can tell an AI image, usually, like a crudely generated AI image, looks like shit, always. AI video usually looks like shit. Everybody thinks it looks like shit. The public has come out and said that they do not trust anything that has AI in it. And I think that tally was somewhere in the realm of like 60% of people don't trust it. So they know they're losing. So I want to know why the hell these things are still being built. Is it because these contracts are already in place? Is it because they just don't give a shit and they're going to try to make it work until literally the economy collapses around it? I don't know. And this goes back to something you said earlier, but I find it funny how these places and these power structures, they want us to self-identify to do fucking anything, but they're going to hide behind fucking NDAs and shell companies to get these stupid-ass data centers built. So it's the rules for thee and not for me kind of thing, as per usual with the powers that be.
And just to kind of leave some food for thought, before we move on to the next question, I believe there's a nefarious reason behind that. Call me a conspiracy theorist, call me what you will. I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm at a point in my life, there are very few things I give a fuck about. But I believe this tech is being forced on people to dumb them down. If you rely enough on this tech, eventually you lose skills. I've had other teacher friends to tell me that they get children. These are like kindergarten, first grade level teachers. They get students who can't even hold a fucking pencil because they're so dependent on this tech. You have young people today who don't even know how to operate a basic Windows Explorer or File Explorer because they've used so many applications, external applications to do these things. And, now this shit's being forced into search engines. And how long is it going to be before people lose the basic skills required to do a deep and thorough search? Because I remind you again, an ignorant population is like wet clay. It can be easily molded. But if you have that knowledge, you have that information, it's like like a glass-fired vessel. Yeah, you can still break it, but you're not molding that son of a bitch.
Mm.
And one last thing I will leave you with before we move on to the next question. My great-grandfather, he said this about politicians, and I think this is equally true for these big tech bros. Now, my great-grandfather, he was not he was not a anti-American guy, anti-government guy. He fought in the Second World War in the Merchant Marines, but he would never vote in an election. He said a politician is a lot like a man at a bar trying to pick up a woman. That man's going to tell that woman whatever he needs to tell her to get her to go home and sleep with him. Likewise, that politician is going to tell you whatever they think you want to hear to get you to vote for them. Those data centers and those tech bros, they're going to tell you whatever they want you to hear to agree with them. And at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones who are left rationing water with dirty water, polluted water, or no water. And they're going to have clean water. So keep that in mind when you hear these data centers and these big tech bros whisper those sweet nothings in your ear. They're trying to get into your pants. And you're not going to like it after they're done fucking you.
Well said.
Another thing I want to bring up here, and it's really interesting that I mentioned the waterfowls in my, in our last discussion. I'm not saying I necessarily believe this part right here, but it is something interesting to think about. Now, some have speculated that these data centers aren't really for AI, but the NSA spy stations, similar to 33 Thomas Street in New York. And for those who are unfamiliar with 33 Thomas Street, officially, on paper, it's an AT&T telecommunications building. Due to documents leaked by Edward Snowden, who's a real American patriot, by the way. If you ever want to see what a real American patriot looks like, look at Snowden. Also John Brown too, but that's a different story. But anyway, the documents that he leaked, unmasked 33 Thomas Street as a surveillance hub, given the code name Titan Point. And again, if you would like more information about this, I've left a link to a waterfowls video talking about this in the description below. Now, I want to ask you, Khan, do you think these data centers are legit for AI or for some other nefarious purpose?
I mean, I feel like it could be both, because AI is being used for everything now. And, the more that I mull it over in my head, the more I realize, data centers take a whole lot of resources. And with how lackluster AI is in providing even basic information without hallucinating, it makes me wonder, could these places actually be surveillance hubs? But then again, isn't any internet service provider location technically a surveillance hub? Because you brought up Edward Snowden, and Edward Snowden is the person that I learned about the third-party doctrine from, which is, for those that don't know, is basically some form of legal litigation that makes it okay for law enforcement to obtain information about a person that they would otherwise need a warrant for. They can obtain information about them from a third party. And the earliest incarnation of this happening was there was some lady who was getting weird phone calls from a guy. I think it was in the 70s or something like that. Getting weird phone calls. Didn't know who it was, but it kept happening. So she called the police, and they were like, well, we don't have any real leads. Well, we have a lead, but we don't have a way to get access to anything on the inside because we don't have probable cause. So they went to the local telephone company and asked for telephone records from a specific location, being that guy's house. And, telephone company complied because, otherwise they'd be pissing off the police and, maybe they would actually be helping out, quote unquote. So you're talking about that place being an AT&T building that is called, was it Titan Point? I think at this point, every internet service provider, phone company, what have you, AI center, they're all in bed with the government. I mean, shit. When I was doing some research just a few minutes ago trying to find a Discord alternative, I found out that the one that people were lauding, Matrix, is called Matrix. And apparently they openly disclosed that they will share their files with the government. And I'm like, well, nowhere I'm not going. So we really can't, as always, governments are usually the apparatus for the elite to interface with the public. And in this instance, I feel like they can leverage businesses to be the same thing, because businesses have elevated immunities over everybody. They can get away with pretty much anything, violating all sorts of rights just because they're a business. So it's funny because the government usually is like the fall guy for any kind of situation like this. Because we look at it and we're like, oh, it's the fucking government is behind it. They're the bad guys. But in reality, if it's a multi-billion-dollar monolithic company pulling the strings and facilitating the handover, is there really any difference to the evil involved?
Same shit, different asshole.
Yep.
Now, before we move on, I just want to point out that the corporations are not your friends. The NSA itself admitted that AT&T was overly eager to help them. Like, AT&T was more than willing to help them, like went well far and beyond. So no, corporations are not your friends, and try, break away from them as much as possible. That's what I'll say. I want to ask you one final question on this topic. I want us to move on to it. A bit of a heavy topic, but not as current topic.
Okay.
What do you think we can do to push back against data centers?
I don't know. Aside from arming the local homeless population with the knowledge that there's countless amount of dollars worth of precious metals in them. I do know, because I have seen a few videos about local people on ground level organizing to try to work on ways to bar these things from entering their communities in an official capacity with their government. Depending on how effective that is, because it sure as hell seems like it's not being effective, but at least there's people doing stuff. People are moving. People want to defend their communities, right? So I think that if this shit keeps going on and more cities start to get infected with this bullshit, I think eventually, if push comes to shove, there's probably going to be like some LA style riots on these things. At least I really hope so, because that's what they deserve. I think personally, each one of these places need to be burned down and the owners need to be strung up. Yep. That's just my opinion. But people who do this shit and facilitate so much harm onto good people, good, innocent, hardworking, unsuspecting people, those people need to be shot. Period.
Yep.
Because that is untold amounts of destruction being inflicted upon innocent people. You're causing so many kinds of diseases. You're causing so much strife. You're causing want. You're causing extreme levels of poverty. And once again, for what? Shitty looking cat pictures. Shitty fucking deep fakes of your grandma, so some asshole in Russia can scam you out of your life savings. Like, what is the use for this shit? Fucking nothing. It's to replace people. It is skinwalker technology. That's all AI is. It's all it's ever been. It's all it's going to be. So, I think people just need to worry about organizing more. I think people need to get a little bit more active, and I'm using that with heavy quotation marks. They get a little bit more active in stopping this shit from happening, and you need to get a little bit more active in organizing your communities. You need to prepare yourself. You need to, I think everybody needs to arm themselves, to be honest with you, because a polite society is an armed society. And, I think average people are starting to do this. And I know this isn't technically related to data centers, but it is to the surveillance dragnet that they're trying to drape over the entire country. There are cities who signed contracts with flock cameras who are regretting it. And these cities, as a unit, are going around and covering the flock cameras because, technically they're still under contract. The cameras have to be up, but nobody wants them there. So they're going around and covering these flock cameras with trash bags on like a citywide scale in order to disable them. And I think the ingenuity of the common man is going to outdo all the shit that comes along with this AI, these data centers, these cameras, the surveillance. Because we've talked about it already tonight, like kids with the fake mustaches, kids using pictures of cartoon driver's license, kids using fucking Gmod face generation to get past age verification. So I think the common man is going to come out on top. We're just going to have to band together a little bit more because, like I said, all this shit is connected. And I feel like it's the final push to really put us in a cage. And I feel like if we beat them, then we can throw these chains off and be safe for at least a little while. And I'm hoping that we're going to ride the clock out on them pretty soon. because even businesses are starting to see that data centers are not worth it, that AI is not worth it, that AI is costing them a lot of money. And if stupid ass CEOs of multi-billion dollar companies are starting to lose money, they're going to take notice and they're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be using this. And then hopefully Sam Altman, Peter Thiel, and all their other fucking rotten friends can be shot into the sun because we don't need them. We need to remove them from the natural cycle of Earth completely.
Yeah, I just want to quickly elaborate on something you said, and then we'll have to move on to the next topic. Louis Rossmann, who's a fantastic YouTuber, I would highly recommend you follow him if you don't already. He brought up a story in one of his videos some time ago, a couple of months ago. There was a police officer who abused that camera technology to stalk and harass his ex. Okay? So, just kind of throwing it out there, having your personal life under 24-hour surveillance is not a good idea, because if data exists, the wrong people can get to it. So, just throwing that out there. Now, Khan has read a couple books on his stream, and I've dubbed these streams Doki DOki Insurrectionist Literature Club. And in the most recent series, we read Industrial Society by Fyodor Ted Kaczynski. You know, the famous great work that starts with the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. That it's not an easy read. It's a challenging read. I don't agree with everything the man said. And I think he had some good points. I think he made some fucked up points. And much to his credit, as I will discuss later, he did recant from some of those views. So make it at what you will. But I want to ask you, Khan, what did you think about Industrial Society?
It's a difficult book to talk about because you know, I can definitely tell Ted's personal slant on it. He definitely has a anti-SJW YouTuber circa like 2016 vibe to some of the stuff that he says. Because he always talks about, oh, people just are fucking, they're sensitive, they need to man up, they need to do this, that, and the other. And you know, it doesn't really paint him in a good light, because as I've come to find out over the course of my life, the people who say that they're being subjected and marginalized, they're usually right. And I feel like the people who are constantly like trying to rail against that and be like, oh, you're just fucking, you're such a pussy, you need to man up, and like this shit isn't happening to you, you're just trying to make excuses for being a victim and shit. I think those people are just like full of shit, and they just want somebody to talk shit against, to feel big and bad about. And you know, I say this as like as a person who has moved on from that. When I was a teenager, I was very much the same way. I will be first to admit it. I was one of those assholes that said shit like that because, you know, I'm naturally a contrarian. So I see some people saying some shit like that. I'm naturally intended to disagree, but I also am a person that likes to hash things out about life, right? So it didn't really work out for really young Khan, trying to talk about social issues like that. But, you know, I've grown up now, and I'm not an idiot anymore, so I don't believe in shit like that. So I went in fully expecting that to be the whole book. But then he actually made like some really good points about, you know, the future of technology and how it interfaces with humanity, and like the potential for like humanity to be overtaken by technology, and all of the little social caveats that come with industrialization. And it's such a dense text to talk about, but I feel like he was right about more things than not. I would say by like a narrow split, maybe a 70-30 split, he was right versus wrong. because, as we enter late stage capitalism, as we've gotten to this point, a lot of the things he said were correct, like the emotional disparity, the lack of meaningful connection, the lack of community, the lack of living a truly meaningful life. I feel like all of that has come to fruition, and it has been for some time now, but it's more apparent now. And I don't know if I can say that it's probably a good book on the subject. It feels very opinionated in places, but I feel like it's worth a read if you want to take a look at what's going on around you and, get a perspective on the kind of damage that industrialization actually does to the human spirit. And, I'm not saying do what Ted did. I mean, it would be fun if somebody out there, way out there, far away from me, were to do some stuff like this, because, they fucked up the release of the Epstein files. So somebody's got to take care of some shit. Somebody's got to take trash out, like Ted did. But yeah, I think it's a good read if you're looking at it from the perspective of how capitalism has destroyed not only humanity, but like the natural order.
So, fun fact for my listeners at home. One of Uncle Ted's victims was, in fact, on the Epstein list. So, make of that what you will. Now, I do want to bring up something about, I don't know if he ever changed his views about SJWs.
Mm-hmm.
But he did change his views about women. I just want to read something he said real quick. He says in a letter, I believe, he says, "I am now ashamed of the things I have fought and written about women in years past, and I want to apologize to all the women on my legal team and to women in general. There were several reasons for my former resentment towards women, and I offer these only as explanations, not as excuses. My macho attitude in my youth, my failures with women, accumulated anger, and the fact that in my younger years I had no opportunity to become closely acquainted with any woman who deserved respect. The women relatives to whom I was closest were not very admirable, and the two women I dated both turned out to have serious character flaws. As the years passed, my resentment toward women diminished. I learned that there are many women far more worthy of respect than the few women I had known closely earlier in life. I learned to control my anger, and I can now see its real sources more clearly. And I have grown older. I have come to appreciate more the characteristic virtues of women, such as warmth, kindness, and sensitivity to the feelings of others. After getting to know the women on my legal team, I begin to feel especially ashamed of my former attitudes towards women. They are stronger and better people than the few women I knew closely in earlier periods of my life, and I have great respect for them both as human beings and in their professional capacities. I am also very fond of them personally. So once again, I want to apologize to them and to all the women for my former attitudes." And I don't agree with everything the man did. I don't agree with everything he said. I don't think there's any coming back from killing innocent people. I don't think he can come back from that. There's no way you can fix that for him. But in regards to his views on women, I think anybody, especially as they get older, they deserve the ability to repent of their biases. And it just kind of goes to show that a lot of prejudice can be done away with by interacting with people you were prejudiced with. You learn more about them. And Ted was a brilliant man. He was a brilliant man. Despite, the horrible things he did, he was a brilliant man. But if somebody like that can struggle, then the common man, will have that situation as well. But there's room to grow for everybody, or for most people, I would say, at least in regards to prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
No, just one final thing I want to bring up, because actually it's really amazing in your answer. You actually covered almost every question I wanted to ask you about industrial society. In regards to what I think, because I was going to ask you what you think he got right and what you think he got wrong. He has a statement. He has a statement in industrial society. I forget the exact quote, but he says something like, you can't negotiate with technology. You know, it's going to force its way into your lives until it has complete control. And I 100% believe that. You know, going back to my hentai tentacle sex monster analogy, it's going to do that. On the other hand, unlike Ted, I like technology. I absolutely love technology. I'm not anti-tech. I love technology. It's given me many friends. Hell, it's helped me meet so many people. You know, it's gave me the internet. It's gave me video games. Hell, it even gave me a family. You know, I met my wife online. So yeah, it's given me so much. I just don't like how it's being used to hurt people. I don't like how it's being used to hurt the planet. And you know what? You can call me a Luddite. You can call me whatever you want to. I don't take offense to the word Luddite, because contrary to popular opinion, the Luddites were not actually anti-tech. They were anti-unscrupulous businessmen. And if you want proof of that, I will leave a video from a well-respected historian down in the description below. So fuck with me, tech bros, if you want. But yeah, now I have two more questions. I know we're really running low on time, but these are very straightforward. I want to turn back to you, because I always like to give my guests one final question. What does the future hold for Tsar Khan?
Man, I wish I knew the answer to that myself. I mean, all the stuff we've talked about tonight about, like, where's the internet going to be in a year's time? Like, where's it going to be in 6 months' time, even? I'm really just trying to plan for the rest of this year. Like, the future for me is I would like to spend more time with my internet friends, for one. I want to just hang out with them more. Not even like, don't even have to stream, don't even have to like collaborate, even though, like, you know, that stuff is fun. But, you know, I just want to spend time with them, because, like you said, like, what if it's all gone tomorrow? And you just never know when that's going to be these days, because every day you wake up, it's like there's a new horror, a new man-made horror beyond our comprehension being unveiled. So I'm just going to try to have more fun with the people that I care about that are around me. I'm trying to do a lot of the ideas that I've had on the back burner for a long time on my stream. I'm just trying to have more fun in general with my stream. I'm playing a little bit more loosey-goosey with how I do things. You know, I just want to keep creating, stay busy, stay working on my stuff and the things that make me happy, keep streaming for as long as I can. And if I somehow am not able to stream on Twitch, I'll make my own stream on Oncast. I kind of want to do that anyway. And if I'm unable to do that at some point, and shit, I'll figure something out. Because, you know, I kind of like this gig. I kind of like being Khan, so I want to keep doing it for as long as it feels fun to me. And it's still fun to me after 4 years. So it's kind of a non-answer, because it's really non-specific, but that really is the modus operandi for why I stream and why I'm on the internet in this form. Just to hang out with cool people, chat some shit, swap some stories, swap some knowledge, and, you know, just have fun, man. Like, make cool shit, talk to cool people, do cool things. You know, life is dope, and we got to do dope shit.
Amen to that. Now, I just want to leave with one final piece of knowledge, or I guess wisdom. And you've heard me say this, and hell, if you've seen my last video, you heard me say it there, but this is something that's been reinforced in me since I made my last video, because I recently, I've had dengue fever for a second time, and so it's really put my mortality into perspective for me. So when facing the end of anything, the end of life, the end of your life or your existence, or your career or whatever, there are two ways you can react to that. You can let that get you depressed, making you feel powerless, or you can let that shit embolden you. You can let it inspire you to make the most out of the time you have left. And that's what I'm doing. And that's why this has been such a fucking out there episode. Because, I don't give a fuck. I really don't. I'm going to push this limit as far as it can go. But without repeating myself too much, one final question, because I give all my guests this opportunity. Do you have any questions for me?
Do I have any questions for Big Mike? Let me think for a minute. See, I don't know. I feel like we talk so much because, you're a regular on my stream, for which I'm very thankful for. And I always try to catch your videos as soon as they drop as well. Have you, with all the stuff going on and with the potential for the big platforms to start doing age verification shit, maybe the whole internet doesn't go away, maybe it's just the big platforms start doing this shit, have you considered the possibility of continuing the saga of Big Mike as a blog on your own website?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the features I'm working on. Now, and actually, I learned how to do that from you. I learned how to install a blog on my website from you. So my website is still very much under construction. I'm hoping to be finished with it by July, but because of my recent hospitalization and also getting back into YouTube, and it may be delayed a bit. But I am hoping to do that. Even if I still stick around because, things continue like normal, I still plan to update it because, it's much easier for me to write a couple paragraphs than to put out a video, or it's a much better format to write. You'd be able to write paragraphs than a goddamn character limit like you find on Bluesky or Twitter. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely something that's going to happen. It's coming in the future. I don't really know what order I'm going to implement the feature in. This week, as I'm recording this, I've been working on an internet museum for my website. I should be finished with that either today or tomorrow and this coming week, because I set aside a certain amount of time every day to work on my site, to work on my HTML skills. I'm looking forward. Well, I can't say I'm looking forward, but I'm going to be working on something else. I don't know exactly what aspect of my site I'm going to be working on next week, but the blog is going to be somewhere. It is definitely still on that list somewhere.
Oh yeah, I look forward to it.
All right, do you have anything else? Nothing's off the table.
Are you going to continue Doki DOki Blue Skies?
That's a great question. I do want to. But part of me actually, I'm considering Doki DOki side stories first. Because I feel like side stories are probably more manageable. Much more manageable. And it would be a great, a great way to put out more videos while I'm working on my bigger projects. Because what I think about Doki DOki side stories is that each of these stories are self-contained. So you don't have to see every story. But they're cute stories, and if you're like me, you enjoy Yuri, and if you don't know what Yuri is, it's anime, hentai, and manga with lesbian love. You're not going to see that in these stories, but also, it's not hard to imagine that it is Yuri from what they give you. So there's that. There are a lot of scenes where it's easy to say, hey, oh, Monica and Sayuri have a thing going on. Or Yuri and Natsuki, oh yeah, they knocking boots. And what's really interesting about side stories is that it takes place in an alternate reality. So Monica's just a normal person. It's just, what would happen if these were just normal high schoolers? And it all takes place before the main character comes. So if you ever wanted to know what these characters were like before shit hit the fan in Doki Doki Literature Club, it's great. It's great for that. And so I'm thinking about doing that. And because of their length, I could do maybe more than one per video. So that would be something. In fact, I may give that a shot next week, actually, depending on how editing this video goes. But yeah, and once I feel comfortable with that, I think maybe I want to move back to Doki DOki Blue Skies. I think so. The problem I had is my life was very complicated last year. Very complicated. And complicated in a good way, but still complicated nonetheless. And so I couldn't really focus on that. And I had some issues when I recorded a couple of episodes. It kind of took the wind out of my sails, to be honest with you. Like, I recorded one episode and OBS was off-centered. And so I had to go back and redo that. And then I recorded another episode, and like an idiot, I forgot to check the volume levels. And so the music was super loud. And so you could barely hear the things I was saying. So that happened back to back, kind of took the wind out of my sails, plus the other complicated stuff that was going on. But I do hope to do it one day. And I appreciate the patience that, the people who follow me have, because on the one hand, you never know what the fuck you're going to get with a Big Mike video. On the other hand, you never know when you're going to get a Big Mike video. It's really sad. It really is. I've dealt with a lot of heavy shit in my life, and sometimes that comes up. And, I need to step back for a couple weeks. I'm a father, too. That makes shit more complicated. And also, I'm a man. I have many passions. That's probably my biggest issue. I have so many things I'm interested in, so many things I want to do. Like I'm working on a book, for example. And I've been ever since I had dengue fever for the first time. After I got to the hospital, I started working on this book because I was like, damn, what if I die? And everything I've learned, it just goes poof with me. I don't like to talk too much about my personal life, because philosophy, religion, spirituality is a very divisive topic. But I've had friends from different religions, different philosophies. I've talked to teachers, both in the academic, secular sense, and also in the spiritual sense, from many different backgrounds. I've read many different books, and so I've gained wisdom from many different perspectives. And so I want to sit down before I die. I want to sit down, and I want to write out all the wisdom I can remember that I learned, organized by topic. And it's probably a fool's errand to try to do that, but that's what I want to do, because I feel like if you're going to gather wisdom and you're not going to share it, if you don't gather knowledge or information and not share it, then it's pointless. It's pointless. It's a waste. It's like having money and not using it to help people. So that's just kind of where I'm at. But I do thank everybody for their patience with dealing with that. But my brother Khan, he has an early morning tomorrow, and so I don't want to keep him any longer. We're already over a little bit from when we wanted to end, but we were late getting started. So I do apologize about that, Khan. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but Khan actually did the art for this YouTube video's thumbnail. I had entered a contest and I won it, but he did the art nonetheless. And I want to thank him for that, because it really means a lot to me.
Oh, it's no problem at all. I had fun making it.
All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls, thank you so much for joining us as well. Be sure to check out Tsar Khan on Twitch. He streams on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. And be sure to give him a follow on Bluesky at the links below. Also, if you would like some information on some of the things that were mentioned here, such as data colonialism, or Titan Point, or the fact that Luddites were not anti-technology, I will leave links to those in the description below. Also, a special thanks to Fran, who does a wonderful job of doing my art. A special thanks to all of my friends on Twitter. I wouldn't be here without you all. And most importantly, a special thank you to all of you for watching this video. Please like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you dislike it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And if you like my videos, please subscribe and turn your notifications on. And until next time, fam, I'm not suicidal, okay? I have no plans on ever eating uranium or plutonium or disappearing. And I think I can say the same thing for Khan. So if that happens, you know it was not us. But until next time, fam, here's hoping we all end up at the same CIA Black Torture site. Peace out!